Discover the incredible journey of a cowboy who married a rejected Apache, a heartwarming gift. The sun crested over the jagged horizon, casting golden rays through the dusty windows of the barn. Jake's rough hands trembled slightly as he brushed a patina of dirt off his saddle. He knew that the day would draw him closer to Leela, the Apache woman whose fire burned brightly against the disapproval of their small, insular town. Every stolen moment with her was a thread in an exquisite tapestry of love and rebellion. Yet as he secured the saddle to his horse, a tight knot of anxiety settled in his gut. The world outside felt charged, an electric undercurrent of untold stories waiting to erupt. In a town built on tradition and loyalty, Jake struggled against a tide of expectations. His family's ranch was almost as old as the mountains, steeped in generations of devotion to the land and each other. But love, genuine and fierce, was complicating the simple life he had always known. Would he lose everything, the ranch, his family's esteem and his own identity, by choosing Leela? The thought echoed relentlessly in his mind as he mounted his horse and set off into the wide expanse that seemed to swallow his fears whole. Today's ride took him toward town, where the swell of voices seeped from the local diner like smoke from a chimney. Curiosity tugged at him, and he pulled his horse to a stop. As he dismounted and crept close, conversations morphed into sharp, jagged knives. The townsfolk's laughter turned to venomous whispers about Leela, questioning her worth to him and his sense of judgment. Each word felt like a lash against his heart, a reminder of the insurmountable obstacles their love faced. He fought a rising wave of doubt, haunted by memories of his father's stern warnings about loyalty and betrayal. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jake hustled away from the diner, his heart racing from the confrontation between love and the roots of history he'd carried unwittingly. The skies darkened as he rode back home, shadows framing thoughts of Leela and the clan that cast ancient chains over them. An unearthed voice from his grandfather's old journal, found in the attic, now taunted him with truths he'd never wanted to confront. Tucked neatly within its pages, a tale of injustice, lineage, and vengeance revealed a bitter feud affecting both families, a revelation that twisted his stomach. Lightning streaked the heavens, causing him to stir as he parked his horse and sunk to the porch steps, the worn wood creaking under his weight. The unforgiving remnants of history collided with the currents of his modern love, threatening to drown him in their depths. An echoing silence settled around him, amplifying his internal struggle. Should he cling to the loyalty that had defined his family, or map a new destiny, one that included Leela? Just as those thoughts coalesced into clarity, a chill snaked down his spine. The community meeting, already brooding, loomed in his mind like an impending storm. Would he stand by Leela and fight against the tide of his ancestors' sins, or yield to the overwhelming weight of expectation pressing on his shoulders? The world felt like a powder keg, every breath fueling the flames of his impending decision. As he exhaled slowly, he could feel the walls closing in around him, and with every heartbeat he understood, his choice would carve the path of their lives forever. As night fell, a blanket of muted stillness enveloped the ranch. Jake sat on the porch, head in hands, feeling the weight of his heritage pressing down on him like the damp earth beneath his feet. The world felt perilously close to uprooting him, plunging him into turmoil. He could almost hear his father's voice again. Honor the family, Jake. Reputation is everything. But what was reputation worth weighed against the fire in his heart for Leela? He pushed the thoughts away, attempting to reel in the chaotic storm brewing within him. Distant flashes of lightning illuminated the clouds, mirroring the flash of realization that ignited within his thoughts. His decision at the community meeting would not only define him, but reshape the legacy he was stepping into. The secrets from his grandfather's journal spiraled through his mind like swirling autumn leaves, each revelation dissecting a part of his past he thought he understood. Jake's breathing steadied as he closed his eyes. He envisioned Leela, her spirit fierce in the face of adversity, and how their moments together illuminated the darkness imposed by the world around them. He imagined her smile shining through the biting cold of judgment, and with that image, a burgeoning resolve kindled in his chest. He wouldn't allow his ancestors' shadows to dictate his choices any longer. The love he felt for Lila was a force all its own, radicalizing the very fabric of his existence. A sense of purpose blossomed. Yet the thought of facing the town, Con Mayfield judging both him and Lila, passed like a gust of wind, stirring doubt. Would he be ready for the confrontation that awaited him? The anger, frustration, and love converged in an urgent wave. He felt compelled to not only defend Lila, but also to challenge the deep, swirling prejudices woven tightly into the town's very foundation. At dawn, the town hall would be alive with voices demanding answers, righteous fury bubbling beneath the surface. He imagined the faces that would spit disbelief and the looks that would slice sharper than any knife. But now, Jake calculated his next move. It wouldn't be enough to merely stand beside Lila. He needed to confront the ancestral legacies that had tainted their love. The fear within him began to morph into resolve, a vision crystallizing as he combined love and loyalty in a newfound definition of bravery. The morning sun would rise, but in that moment, he understood he wasn't just preparing for a meeting. He was fortifying his identity, cementing a new path forged in conviction. With each passing moment, he was peeling away layers of the past, allowing his true self, the lover, the warrior, the man, to emerge. As the realization coursed through him, something else emerged, an awareness of the full scale of his internal arsenal. He had strengths born from humble beginnings, intelligence honed by necessity, resilience shaped by struggle, and now, compassion carved from love. But would it be enough? With a deep breath, he stood, groaning slightly as the porch boards protested. He needed to prepare his mind and heart for what lay ahead, where conflict would lead him to redefine not just himself, but also the world around him. Lila was waiting, and there was more to fight for than just their love. It was a battle to redraw the lines of history. The sun crested the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. Jake closed his eyes, steadied his breath, and whispered to himself, "Today is the day of choices." The thoughts felt like the first droplets of rain before a fierce storm, and in that moment, he sensed the shift that would change everything. And as the horizon brightened, he felt the palpable tension ride upon his shoulders, foreboding yet invigorating. Would he summon the courage necessary to confront the townsfolk, to dismantle the expectations shackled to his family's name, or would he fall silent like those before him? In the distance, the hard-edged roofs of Mayfield loomed, a firm reminder that the future he feared was beckoning. The time had come to face the ghosts of his past, and he'd either rise with Lila or fall beneath the weight of tradition. The town hall stood before Jake, a monolith of resistance and judgment. Gritting his teeth, he inhaled deeply, tasting the crisp morning air laced with the faint scent of rain threatening to fall. Today would not just be another meeting, it was a trial by fire. The crowded room echoed with whispers of discontent, a rhythm that mirrored the thumping of his heart. As he stepped over the threshold, the atmosphere shifted. Eyes turned toward him, some filled with curiosity, others with disdain. He felt the weight of their collective disbelief settle on his shoulders, each stare a judgment waiting to happen. Could he transform their skepticism into understanding? He fought the urge to retreat, to hide behind the safety of silence. His father's teachings resounded ominously in his mind. "Reputation is everything," the words twisted within him, testing the nascent resolve he had built throughout the night. The air crackled as more townsfolk gathered, forming a circle of expectation, a charged assembly ready for conflict. His chest tightened, nerves and anticipation intermingling. Jake glanced toward the back of the room where Lila stood, her presence a beacon of hope amid the uncertainty. The fire within him flickered brighter at the sight of her, the embodiment of the love that defied the boundaries the world sought to impose upon them. He needed to channel that strength, transforming it into words that would break down walls instead of erecting them further. "Thank you all for gathering today," Jake's voice rang out, though it felt shaky under the weight of their scrutiny. "I stand before you not just as a member of this community, but as a man deeply in love and determined to change the conversation." A murmur swept through the crowd, curiosity mingled with skepticism. He pressed on, the energy of the room shifting with each word he spoke. For too long, we have clung to the ghosts of our past, allowing tradition to blind us to the possibilities of the here and now. We can't let prejudices shape our futures. He fought to keep his voice steady, driving forward even as faces in the crowd hardened. Lila deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, just as anyone would expect. Our love challenges the narratives that have been etched in stone, but isn't that the very essence of progress? Jake's heart pounded, but he noticed the flicker of recognition in some of the faces. Doubts began to bubble under the surface. He pressed forward, utilizing the power of vulnerability. I've wrestled with my family's legacy, with the expectations of my upbringing. Today, I choose not just to defend my love, but to redefine what it means to belong to this community. Silence enveloped the room momentarily, creating an unexpected space for reflection. Each breath felt heavy as he searched for the right words to pierce through the lingering prejudice. It is time for a new legacy, a legacy built on understanding rather than fear. Every one of us has the choice to see beyond the labels we've been taught. Suddenly, a voice pierced through the silence, raw and accusatory. You think you can just change what everyone has been taught for years? This town is built on tradition, Jake. It was Mrs. Thompson, a formidable figure who had never hesitated to protect the status quo. Anger radiated from her. Her words struck a chord, twisting the energy in the room once more. Jake's stomach dropped, but he couldn't retreat. The confrontation had begun, and now he needed to respond. The moment surged with intensity as he realized this was not just an exchange of words. It was a battle for his identity, his place, and his future with Leela. In that instant, Jake confronted not just the townsfolk, but the remnants of his past. I understand how hard it can be to let go. But if we want to thrive, we must embrace change. We can honor our past without letting it cage our potential. Would this be enough to stir ripples of change? The weight of those final words hung in the air, palpable and heavy, as a storm of emotions swirled around him. Instead of backing down, he stood his ground, prepared for the fallout. The air felt electric, and he sensed the turning tides. Yet, with every nerve unspooled, he realized the struggle had merely begun. An answer lingered at the edge of a knife's tip. A resolution awaited in the balance, and as he cast his gaze toward Lila, the urgency of the moment loomed larger than ever. Would they emerge stronger together, or would the history they fought against prove insurmountable in the face of overwhelming resistance? The tension in the room thickened, hanging over Jake like a storm cloud ready to burst. His stomach churned with uncertainty as Mrs. Thompson's accusation reverberated. Could he truly initiate change in a place so steeped in tradition? The silence that followed felt like an infinite stretch of time, where every heartbeat counted down the seconds to his response. Change isn't easy, I know, he replied, his voice steadying with resolve. But what we cling to as tradition often becomes a barrier, a wall that separates us from understanding one another. I'm not here to dismantle the foundation of our community. I want to build on it, create something richer. Her glare only intensified. This wasn't just about beliefs. It was about identity. Jake's gaze met Lila's, grounding him in the storm. He saw the flicker of hope in her eyes, a reflection of the courage he needed to draw from. The words flowed, fueled by her faith in him. We must redefine what it means to be a part of this community. Embracing love in all its forms should not be seen as an affront, but as a testament to our growth. A ripple of murmurs coursed through the crowd, shifting from skepticism to contemplation. He sensed the tide beginning to turn, but Mrs. Thompson's features remained set in unwavering defiance. Determination washed over him, morphing the fear that had threatened to cripple him into a fierce defiance against the status quo. To honor our history is not to be shackled by it. My love for Lila pushes me to confront my own fears, fears that have been reinforced by the very things I was taught to hold dear. I ask each of you to question what you've been taught, and to consider the possibility of a future that includes everyone regardless of their differences. Isn't that the legacy we want to leave behind? Pausing, he registered both admiration and apprehension in the eyes interlaced throughout the room. Rapid pulses of emotion whirled within him, fear mingled with the thrill of possibility. He was taking risks, laying bare his vulnerabilities to those who might never understand. Imagine a future where our children can grow up loving without limits, free from the shadows of preconceived notions. A future where this town doesn't just survive, but thrives in its diversity. That is the legacy I want to leave behind. A pregnant silence followed his declaration. Jake braced himself for the backlash that might come from his radical honesty. Would he inspire change, or would he ignite a fury that would consume him? In that moment, Jake became acutely aware of his own transformation. He felt emboldened by the authenticity of his words. Challenging their minds unshackled something within him, revealing a strength he never knew existed. It dawned on him that this confrontation wasn't solely about acceptance. It served as a mirror reflecting his own evolution. As murmurs gained momentum, the air vibrated with both dissent and curiosity. He was standing at the precipice of a decision, not merely for this meeting, but for how he would navigate the fallout that would inevitably follow. Jake's heart raced as Mrs. Thompson prepared to retaliate, her expression thunderous. He understood if this escalated, it could shatter the fragile foundation he had begun to build. The moment of truth loomed, and with it, the realization that every choice he made from here would shape not only his future with Lila, but redefine his place in a community caught in the throes of change. Would the collective pulse of understanding drown out the harsh cadence of fear, or would tradition strike back with a vengeance? As he awaited her response, Jake felt the weight of not just his battle, but a greater revolution unraveling within and around him. But one question lingered. How far was he willing to go to fight for the love he believed in? Mrs. Thompson's gaze was reminiscent of thunderclouds threatening a storm, and Jake felt the weight of that intensity pressing down on him. The room remained electric, a heightened awareness igniting as he awaited her retort. With every breath, he reminded himself that this moment was not just about the confrontation. It was a catalyst for his growth. "Your beliefs are misguided, young man," Mrs. Thompson finally uttered, her voice slicing through the tension. "You may think you're a beacon of change, but all you're doing is inviting confusion into our children's lives." Her words stung, but rather than cower away, Jake felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. "Confusion leads to understanding," he countered, each syllable punctuated by a newly kindled confidence. "When we seek to include, rather than exclude, we create an opportunity for our children to learn tolerance and compassion. That's the education they deserve." The murmurs started to gather momentum around the room, some in agreement, others clinging to their fears. Through it all, Jake remained hyper-aware of Lila, whose presence felt like an anchor amidst the stormy sea. Their connection, once private and hesitant, now seemed to radiate an energy that matched his burgeoning conviction. He wondered if she felt the shifts within him, the cracks in his earlier uncertainties being filled by the compelling desire for change. The atmosphere shifted. What had begun as a suffocating heaviness now teetered with potential. He contemplated how this moment would pave the way for his own evolution. No longer was he a passive participant in a discussion he feared. He had transformed into a fierce advocate for what he believed in. "Mrs. Thompson," Jake continued, tapping into the courage that had blossomed within him, "you are right to protect what matters to you, but consider this. You're not just defending a legacy, you're stifling progress. I'm not asking you to abandon your values but to embrace a broader definition of love." With each argument he presented, he felt walls within himself begin to crumble. He was coming to terms with his own biases, challenging the deeply ingrained beliefs that had once held him captive. Each interaction was not merely a battle against Mrs. Thompson, but a means of understanding his own limits and expanding his capacity for empathy. "I'm here because I believe love can transcend fear. I've seen how diversity can enrich lives, not diminish them. If we can accept that love wears many faces, perhaps we can build a bridge instead of a wall." The murmurs that had once been cautious began to rise into something closer to support. He could feel the shift. It was tangible, a living entity pulsating in the air. But Mrs. Thompson was not finished. "I refuse to let our town become a mockery of tradition," she howled, her emotional response raw but driven by impulse rather than rationale. Jake felt the stakes heightening. Within him lingered doubts, but they were overshadowed by an unwavering determination. The fight wasn't merely for acceptance, it was a confrontation with his own identity and the man he was destined to become. As Jake stood poised for her next attack, he realized that this battle was only the beginning. The repercussions of tonight would echo in ways he couldn't yet comprehend, shaping not only the community but also his path forward. The door of possibility cracked open, revealing a glimpse of a reality where the struggle for acceptance was fraught with challenge but enriched by growth. He was no longer just advocating for love. In that moment, he was unearthing the essence of who he was meant to be. And as the air crackled with anticipation, Jake understood. The real fight lay ahead. How would he navigate the complexities of his journey now that the stakes had been fully revealed? If he was to win, he'd need to dig deeper into himself than he ever had before. Would he rise to the challenge, or would he falter when it mattered most? The confrontation hung in the air like a charged current, leaving Jake teetering on the brink of revelation. Mrs. Thompson's anger echoed within him, but it transformed from intimidation into fuel. He stood tall, his mind racing. A part of him felt the wild uncertainty of what lay ahead, igniting a fire of purpose that coursed through his veins. He no longer just felt the urge to argue, he felt the deeper call to educate, to transform misunderstanding into enlightenment. As the murmurs around him shifted from skepticism to curiosity, Jake found himself seizing the moment. "Change often feels uncomfortable," he said, leaning into their energy, "but growth demands we step into the unknown. By exploring different perspectives, we enrich our lives." The dynamics changed as he spoke. He noted the inquisitiveness forming in some of the audience's eyes, as if they were intrigued to unravel the very fabric of their beliefs. Jake's heart raced, not out of fear, but exhilaration. Each word he uttered was a step towards stepping out of his own shadow. This moment had crystallized for him the importance of identity and belonging, not just for himself, but for those he wished to empower. He was transforming before their eyes, uncovering parts of himself that had been tucked away. Yet, even as the crowd responded, he felt a familiar sensation creep back in, a wave of doubt threatening to wash over his resolve. Who was he to provoke such a fundamental shift? Did he have the strength to endure the backlash that might follow? These thoughts clawed at his confidence, echoing the insecurities he battled throughout his life. But in that moment of uncertainty, he locked eyes with Lila. Her gaze was unwavering, filled not with judgment, but with an illuminating spark. She believed in him. It was as though her faith forged an unbreakable bond between them, tethering him to his purpose. "Let's be honest, Mrs. Thompson," Jake said, steadying himself with each word. "This isn't just about our children's future. This is about our own understanding as adults. Can we allow ourselves to grow alongside them?" It was a strategic move, shifting the focus to collective growth rather than conflict. The room hummed with an undercurrent of contemplation. A hint of change was swirling. Jake could sense a fracture in the rigid stance of his opponent, yet he knew better than to sidestep the difficult emotions this discourse unearthed. In the silence that followed, he felt the pressure building within him, not dread, but the anticipation of breakthrough. There was palpable tension, his damning doubts balanced precariously against the possibility of profound revelation. Some traditions can feel exclusionary, they can burden us. But together, we have the opportunity to redefine normalcy, be the example of a love that stands resilient. The words flowed, blending truth with urgency. Suddenly, Jake was struck by the realization that understanding didn't always equate to acceptance. It often involved grappling with discomfort. As he bravely navigated this territory, he was met with an unexpected applause. Small at first, then building as more voices joined. In that unexpected moment, Jake understood the depth of his influence. The journey ahead wouldn't be simple, as resistance often accompanied enlightenment. He had come far, but he hadn't yet seen the repercussions of his challenge. The charge within him was growing, a necessity to harness this momentum and drive it forward. How could he continue to foster this energy, and what new risks lay just beyond the horizon? Would he have the fortitude to share his message without wavering, standing firm against the backlash that could bring him back to ground zero? Jake inhaled deeply, bracing himself. The road leading beyond the meeting room stretched out with uncertainty, yet he felt an awakening. What would come next would demand everything he had just discovered about himself. The first battle had ignited a war within him. Would he emerge victorious, or would he find himself lost in the fray? Jake stepped out of the meeting room, leaving behind the lingering applause and swirling doubts. The world outside felt dauntingly vast, each sound amplified as if to echo the tumult inside him. He had ignited a flame of intrigue within that room, but could he stoke it into something greater? Was he ready for all that lay ahead? His mind raced with potential strategies. He needed a plan, a purposeful direction to guide him through this transformative journey. As he walked, Jake replayed conversations from the meeting, dissecting phrases, moments of connection, the glimmers of willingness to engage from others. He was no longer an outsider. He had become a catalyst for change, something he had always desired yet had never dared to pursue fully. Yet doubts lingered like shadows trailing his steps. The warmth of Lila's supportive gaze played in his mind. What did she see in him that he seemed unable to identify? He paused outside a nearby cafe, feeling the weight of expectations resting on his shoulders. "I'm not even sure I can handle the backlash if things spiral," he murmured to himself. It was one thing to speak truth to power. It was another to face the ramifications of being that voice. Running a hand through his hair, he took a deep breath. Jake stepped into the cafe, the smell of fresh coffee mingling with the subtle notes of impatience. He needed clarity. Amid the chatter, he sought solace in a corner booth, feeling the hum of activity around him. Alone with his thoughts, he picked up a pen and a napkin, drawing nervous scribbles as he considered possible next steps. What if he organized a follow-up meeting? He envisioned a round table where different perspectives collided in open dialogue. Not just parents, but community members, educators, skeptics, and allies. A difficult yet crucial opportunity to highlight their common threads. He paused, crumpling the napkin. What if no one shows up? What if they think I'm foolish? That nagging voice returned, insistent on planting seeds of doubt. But another part of him, a newly emboldened faction, pushed back. But what if you inspire just one person to consider a different viewpoint? Isn't that worth risking the rejection? The internal struggle was loud and persistent, but so too was the realization of a hidden talent buried beneath endless self-doubt. He could lead conversations, spark interest. He had done it tonight. The applause wasn't merely an echo of courtesy, it was a glint of possibility. With newfound determination, Jake scrawled down the details of his envisioned session. Objectives, potential attendees, key points to address. Each stroke of the pen felt like reclaiming parts of himself that had long been silenced. A realization broke over him. He was becoming someone he had always wanted to be, an advocate for understanding, a voice amid the cacophony of silence. No longer would he allow his insecurities to hold him back. The conversations he initiated were not just about others. They were a step towards reconciling his own tumultuous journey, his need for belonging. As Jake left the cafe, adrenaline coursed through his veins, replacing doubt with fortitude. He felt his resolve harden. He could almost taste the success he sought. Yet one question remained dormant within him. Would he find the strength to follow through? Or would fear once again lead him down a path of retreat? The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows behind him. In the interplay of light and dark, a whisper of doubt lingered, but so too did a flicker of hope. The time had come to face the challenges ahead, and he was ready, wasn't he? With each step, he prepared for the road ahead, knowing it would test him in ways he hadn't anticipated. What stakes would he encounter next, and would he rise to meet them? The notion of potential transformation danced tantalizingly at the edge of his consciousness, stoking his curiosity and determination. Jake awoke the next morning to the sound of the city bustling outside his window. The early light streamed through the glass, illuminating the scruffy notepad sprawled across his desk, covered with his hastily scrawled plans. Each objective, each potential attendee's name was a reminder of the path he chose to brave. Today was the day he would start acting on those ideas, stepping further away from the shadows of self-doubt. As he dressed, the reflection in the mirror felt unfamiliar. The man staring back seemed more confident, more resolute than the one who paced nervously through the cafe last night. Time to take charge, he told himself, momentarily buoyed by the image of Lila's encouraging approval flashing in his mind. He did not have a formal agenda to follow, nor any certainty that his message would resonate, but that uncertainty was entangled with a burgeoning sense of responsibility. This was about more than him. It was a chance to create a dialogue that could reverberate beyond his immediate circle. Jake made his way across town, clutching his notepad, which felt heavier than it should have. The sidewalks buzzed with strangers lost in their everyday routines, each person a kernel of potential dialogue waiting to happen. He rehearsed his opening words to himself, aware how easily he could flub them in front of real people. With each step, he saw visions of engagement, curious faces, attentive listeners, sparking in his imagination. When he arrived at the community center, a familiar tension gripped him. The sight of empty chairs reminded him of his fears. Would anyone come? He pushed through the double doors, heart racing. The lobby was still and quiet, the anticipation palpable in the stale air. He set up the space methodically, arranging the chairs in a circle, a deliberate attempt to break down hierarchical barriers. As he adjusted the seating, Jake's internal voice chimed with warning. What if nobody came? What if they judged him? Yet he pressed on, refusing to let the thoughts invade his purpose. 30 minutes passed, feeling like an eternity. Just when he considered abandoning ship, the first few participants filed in, hesitant but curious, their expressions curious but guarded. Jake's nervous energy shifted towards excitement. Perhaps they could share something unexpected. The gathering took on a life of its own, individuals trickling through the door, transforming the room into a surreal tapestry of perspectives. "Thank you all for coming," he began, fighting the tremor in his voice. He shared his vision, his hopes for open conversations, about perspectives that might clash, perspectives that could unify. Every word felt like a small victory, pushing aside that nagging sense of inadequacy that had tried to derail him. The discussions unfurled, wild and unpredictable. People spoke passionately, challenging each other and sharing stories. Jake found himself not just facilitating but engaging, challenging thoughts, posing questions, to foster even more profound exchanges. He caught glimmers of insight in their eyes, a reflection of the spark he had felt in the meeting room. As the session continued, Jake noticed something remarkable. He was growing in the role. No longer an outsider observing through a window, he was now an active participant, shaping the narrative. Each time he stepped back to allow someone else to speak, he felt his own confidence swell. Could it be that he was beginning to find his footing? But amidst the exhilaration, a familiar voice of doubt crept back in. What if these discussions never led to concrete action? What if his voice faded back into silence after today? The realization struck him. Jake wasn't just facing community challenges, he was confronting his demons, doubt battling beneath the surface, a stark reminder that growth demanded courage. As the evening wore on, one participant raised a hand, sharing a story that echoed Jake's own struggles for belonging. It reminded him of what he sought when he started this journey, a sense of connection, a place to be heard. He leaned into the moment, realizing that both he and his audience were stitching together the fabric of something larger. As the final thoughts flickered out and the participants trickled away, Jake stood amidst the remnants of a successful gathering. In the stillness, he knew this was only the beginning. What had started in doubt had morphed into a fragile web of relationships, the potential for change tethered to open dialogue and bold conviction. Yet deep inside, an unsettling thought lingered. How would he sustain this momentum? What challenges lay ahead, ready to test both his resolve and the foundation of these new connections? That question loomed like a dark cloud as he pushed the chairs back in place, the prospect of tomorrow holding both promise and uncertainty. He took a deep breath, fortifying himself for whatever would come next, flipping his notepad closed with determination. It was time to uncover the real turning point on his journey, the one he could not yet foresee. Jake awoke the next morning to a chill that snuck through the cracks of his apartment. The previous day's gathering looped in his mind like a recording on repeat. He had felt engaged, energized, and most unexpectedly present. But as bright sunlight spilled across his worn floorboards, the familiar grasp of self-doubt crept back in. What if it had all been a fluke? His fingers found the notepad again, its pages waiting for the ink of new ideas. There was no time to wallow in uncertainty. Today marked new challenges. Perhaps it was time to define his vision more clearly, to draw specific paths toward the connections he'd begun. He scribbled down intentions, a desire to not only sustain the discussions, but to take them further. The noise of the city outside drowned out the ambivalence in his mind. Focus, Jake reminded himself as he brewed his morning coffee, the deep aroma swirling through the air, offering a reprieve from his thoughts. The hustle outside beckoned to him, a reminder that life moved on, ready for those who dared to engage. A decision formed. Jake would reach out to the participants from the previous gathering through emails, inviting them to continue the dialogue one-on-one. He began crafting personalized messages, recalling snippets of their conversations, trying to create an authentic tone. His heart raced at the prospect, excitement battling against fear. What if they found him unworthy of their time? Deep inside, he understood that there was no going back now. Each response he awaited was a pulse in this new venture he fancied. Hours passed with a mix of anxious expectation and hopeful anticipation. As responses trickled in, joy filled his chest with each affirmation. Individual meetings emerged, each one a chance not just for conversation but connection. The first meeting with Eloise hit him hardest. She had been one of the quieter attendees, yet he noticed her thoughtful remarks. Her vulnerability struck a chord within him. They met at a quaint cafe, its vintage decor offering comfort amidst the chaos. Jake found himself sharing bits of his story, his own uncertainties laid bare, inviting her to respond with honesty. Eloise listened intently, and as they spoke, the conversation branched out beyond their individual experiences. They began to speculate about the larger implications of their discussions, focusing on how their individual narratives could inspire change. Jake felt his confidence rise, overshadowing the doubts that lurked in the corners of his mind. Trading insights turned into collaborative brainstorming, generating ideas that formed a foundation for further discussions. But with every breakthrough, a shadow loomed over Jake's thoughts. Would his ability to connect come crashing down with the day's end? The fear of not being able to sustain these connections whispered incessantly, a constant reminder of the precarious nature of his newfound role. It felt as though he was playing a game on uncertain ground. Could he shoulder this burden of expectation? Days turned into weeks, and the undercurrent of pressure began to seep into his thoughts. Each one-on-one conversation brought with it insights that sparked inspiration, but his heart squeezed for fear that the collective energy they created would evaporate. What could he do to deepen this engagement? Was there a risk of disappointment when the ideas faded without effective action? The more he pondered, the clearer it became. Jake needed to confront the fear of stagnation gripping him. He could no longer float in the security of self-doubt. He had to commit to something tangible. With each chat, something deeper within him awakened, the codes of doubt challenged by burgeoning resolve. Yet a new dilemma loomed. Could he transform these seeds of thought into actual collaboration? With possibilities swirling, the prospect of failure tinged every decision. Would he risk reaching out to everyone again, this time announcing a structured follow-up that invited commitment? Or would he retreat, wallowing in self-imposed limitations, terrified of further inadequacy? Standing in front of his notepad late that night, Jake felt a presence, not just the pen in his hand, but an overwhelming conviction to use his gains with intention. He was no longer just a participant. He had become an architect of dialogues. And even in uncertainty, he decided to take the leap. As he jotted down plans for the next phase, the question that gripped his mind was no longer, what if, but rather, what is possible? The beginnings of a new initiative took shape on the page, an exploration of themes birthed from their earlier discussions. But as he closed the notepad that night, another thought surfaced, piercing through his newfound confidence. Would anyone be willing to follow him into this uncharted territory? The looming uncertainty hung in the air like an unanswered prayer, setting the stage for what was about to unfold. The sun rose on a crisp morning, the light bathing Jake's office in warmth as he sat surrounded by the remnants of countless late-night brainstorming sessions. Today was pivotal. He was ready to announce the formal follow-up he had been sketching for weeks. The initiative had a name, a purpose, and a target audience. Bridges of Understanding, a local forum designed to engage the community in deeper discussions about acceptance and change. He had finally distilled his passion into action. A sense of camaraderie filled his heart as he drafted the announcement. As the words flowed onto the page, Jake marveled at how far he had come since the first meeting. He remembered the feeling of self-doubt that had clouded his mind, and how he had channeled that uncertainty into something constructive. Each step he had taken, from speaking up for love to transforming discomfort into dialogue, had paved the way for this moment. Once he hit send, a wave of exhilaration washed over him. He was no longer just pushing against the tide of tradition. He was actively steering the ship towards a new horizon. The community needed a collective reflection on the tensions that had simmered for too long. As he set about preparing for the forum, each detail fell into place, inviting speakers who embodied varying perspectives, curriculums that would guide discussions, and activities aimed at fostering empathy. He felt ready. Yet beneath his excitement lingered a familiar trepidation. What if no one showed up? What if old fears took hold and buried the opportunity they had to heal? On the day of the forum, he arrived at the community center, the air electric with potential. As people trickled in, his chest tightened with anticipation. He was standing before a cross-section of the town's fabric. He spotted familiar faces, those who had once been skeptics, now intrigued by the prospect of genuine dialogue. Anxiety morphed into adrenaline, and he stood center stage, framed by a banner of hope with the title of his initiative proudly displayed. "Welcome, everyone," he began, the room filled with expectant faces. "Today is not just about my words or ideas. It's about all of us finding common ground. It's about exploring our differences not as barriers, but as pathways to understanding." Each word painted images of unity that he could almost touch. People leaned in, captivated by the vision he presented. Conversations ignited as attendees started discussing topics that mattered to them, shifting the atmosphere from one of apprehension to engagement, from passive listening to active participation. Moments became meaningful as he saw participants share personal stories, unveiling layers of their lives he had once feared might not resonate. Surrounded by visceral tales of struggle and triumph, the walls began to dissolve, revealing a landscape of compassion. The forum transformed into a living canvas of shared experiences, painted with diverse voices. Through the discussions, Jake facilitated conversations between those who had previously stood on opposing sides. The realization hit that he wasn't just a facilitator anymore. He was fostering a community. Their differences were blending into a rich tapestry of acceptance. It became clear to him that this was what he had longed for, not simply a dialogue but the real promise of understanding. As the day unfolded, words turned into plans. Out of this forum, collaborative ideas emerged, tangible actions sparked by the energy surging through the room. The enthusiasm ignited a commitment to collective efforts, community projects that began to address historical fractures and promote healing. Jake couldn't hold back the grin spreading across his face. He watched as Mrs. Thompson engaged with a younger participant, both discussing how her initial fears could transform into lessons for the next generation. Each interaction was a victory, encapsulating the very essence of his mission, to bridge gaps and illuminate paths to cooperation. Jake stood on the fringes, humbled by the unfolding metamorphosis. He realized that today wasn't simply a successful day. It was a defining chapter in his life. The moments he had feared most were the very opportunities that cultivated growth in both him and his community. As dusk fell, participants flooded toward the exit, their spirits lifted. A palpable change hung in the air, one that he had once only dreamed of. No longer was he the man shrouded in fear. He had orchestrated a symphony of voices, each note resonating with strength and unity. Retreating to a quiet corner, he paused for a moment, cradling the weight of what they had created together. He had discovered that true strength lies in vulnerability, in acknowledgement of fears, and in the audacity to inspire growth. Jake left the community center that night buoyed by a sense of accomplishment that punctuated his transformation. Finally, he had proven to himself that he could stand up to the ghosts of his ancestry and carve out a new identity, not only for himself but for every person in town. In that instant, he knew he was not just a voice of change. He had become a vessel of hope, solidly rooted in his newfound confidence and resilience. The journey ahead would remain challenging, but armed with this experience, he was prepared to navigate whatever came next. It was clear, not only had Jake conquered the insecurities that once dictated his action, but he had also built upon those steps to forge a legacy rooted in understanding. The road ahead sparkled brightly with endless possibilities waiting to unfold, an invitation to further grow, learn, and love. Now, if you found yourself inspired by Jake's incredible journey, you need to subscribe now so you won't miss our next exclusive emotional stories that challenge the status quo. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Get ready for more inspiring content. Comment below your reactions and theories about Jake's transformative journey. We want to hear your insights. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this powerful conclusion. Let's build a community that celebrates personal growth and advocacy.